You don't belong here. This place isn't for people like you." The cold voice echoed through the Silver Spur Diner in Missoula, Montana. Loud, mocking, impossible to ignore. Three leather-jacketed men with patched vests leaned in, shoved her wheelchair, not hard, but enough to bang her into the counter, sending coffee and silverware crashing to the floor. She didn't scream. She said nothing. She only clenched her fists. But a boy by the window saw everything, and so did his father. Just 30 minutes later, a dark green military SUV rolled up outside the diner. 3 Marines strode in. The entire room fell silent. No one paid attention to her at first. No one except the Marines, who had dropped everything to stand by her side. Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where tales of courage and kindness are retold. Let's uncover what really happened. Lydia Carson wheeled through the sliding doors of the Silver Spur Diner with a practiced motion, gentle yet resolute. The wheels clicked softly against the worn tile floor, a familiar soundtrack marking each step of her journey to recovery. She stopped at her usual corner table along the wall, directly beneath the faded wall clock, whose second hand lagged exactly 5 minutes behind real time. A small detail that baffled newcomers, but for Lydia, it served as a daily reminder each noon. Slow down, breathe, find calm. She folded her arms, lifted her gaze to the Marine Corps emblem pinned over her right breast pocket on her faded khaki shirt. The gleaming badge bore the words U.S. Marines under outstretched wings, recalling her first days in the Corps, learning to discipline herself down to the smallest measure, how to endure incoming fire, how to hide fear amid battlefield screams. As she touched the badge today, she felt the metal's cool edge glide over her fingertip. Then she gently wiped away a faint smudge, restoring a piece of the spirit that once crawled through Hellman's dust. Ruby, the diner's manager, a middle-aged woman with soft curls, reached over the counter with a smile, placing before Lydia a plate of black pepper steak and crusty bread. "Your shift swap is all set for today," Ruby said, her tone caring but concise. "Brothers and sisters back from the front need more rest, right?" Lydia simply nodded, her eyes reflecting gratitude. She never asked for extra shifts. The gentle midday work suited her condition. She came here to stay busy, to maintain her calm, not to draw attention. At 44, Lydia Carson had completed 2 tours in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The first tour honed her resilience and her ability to lead a small unit. The second, during an ambush, an anti-vehicle mine cost her right leg. The blast's aftermath was more than a physical wound. It left a void in the trust she once placed in the world, a constant imbalance whenever her feet no longer touched the ground. But rather than choose a prosthetic, Lydia embraced her creaking wheelchair as a steadfast companion, authentic, loyal, never pretending. When the black pepper steak arrived, she gently laid the white napkin across her lap, smoothing each fold before placing knife, fork, and spoon atop with near-military precision. Like a soldier trained to assemble a rifle under fire, every motion, rolling the napkin, folding it, setting down her utensils, Lydia executed in silence, without deviation. This ritual calmed her mind, soothed heavy memories, and reminded her that, even if the world was chaos, she still commanded the motions before her. Most customers did not disturb Lydia. Those who glanced her way remained quiet. Some offered polite nods of respect. Others avoided eye contact, unsure how to meet her wound. A few murmured about a battlefield hero, then shrugged. Seems distant, but Lydia paid no mind. She did not come seeking pity or admiration. She came for rituals, simple gestures that served as medicine to anchor her spirit. Lydia's calloused hands, veined yet graceful, reached for her knife and fork, then methodically lifted each slice of meat and placed it on the crusty bread. Her composed manner made it hard to imagine she once gripped a rifle amid smoke and flames, once wrapped tourniquets under crossfire. She chewed slowly, savoring the rich fat, tasting the pepper's sharp bite lingering in the air, then sipped her sweetened condensed milk coffee, letting its warmth linger on her palate. When her wheelchair rolled gently aside, its wheels striking the tile edge with a steady click. That sound became Lydia's second heartbeat, a practiced breath, slow, unwavering. Each breath, each movement reminded her, "You are here. You remain in control." Minutes passed. The fluorescent lights, tinged with pale gold, cast ripples on the walls, lending the space a cozy glow. Fellow diners ate in quiet contentment, the occasional clink of fork against plate or cup against saucer softly punctuating the hush. It was the peaceful symphony Lydia longed for. On days like these, all she needed was a simple corner of a diner, a cup of coffee, and her steadfast routine to keep her spirit intact, and so life went on. Scars still etched in her fingertips, the wheelchair still creaking in unison with her. The wind howled through the crack of the door. It swept across the floor like a bad omen, slipping through every tiny gap in the Silver Spur diner, bringing the damp chill and the scent of exhaust from the dusty main road outside. Moments later, the door burst open with such force that the ketchup bottles atop the counter teetered, clinking harshly against one another. The wind chime hanging on the frame rattled wildly, its notes jarring against the usual hush. 3 men strode in, tall, brooding, reeking of gasoline. They wore glossy black leather jackets, patched together with rough hand-stitched fabric, each emblazoned with an arrogant nickname: Vulture, Fang, Claw. Every heavy step they took was a declaration. They hadn't come for lunch. They'd come to dominate the room. Vulture led the way, broad-shouldered, thick-necked, lined with a scar across his chin. His smile held no humor. It was slow, contemptuous, as if this world existed only for him to trample. His gaze swept the diner until it landed on Lydia Carson, quietly folding a napkin, and his lips curled as though she were an old toy meant for the trash. "Look at this! The veteran from the center!" he boomed, his voice loud enough for all to hear, heedless of whether they wanted to. He jabbed Fang with his elbow, Fang, who loitered a pace behind. "Probably begging for pity, huh?" Not a muscle twitched on Lydia's face. She continued folding napkins, aligning knives and forks on each table with near surgical precision. No one else spoke. Ruby, the manager, lifted her head from the register, then pretended to polish the sugar dispenser nearby. A couple by the window bowed their heads a little lower. Lydia had heard harsher words on Hellman's battlefields, enemies who didn't mock you. They shot first. But here, on American soil, in a humble diner, words like these carried a different weight, because they could be spoken with impunity. Claw, the largest of the 3, planted himself on a bar stool, his bulk slamming onto the cushion with an irritated thud. He slammed his hand on the service bell. "Where's the menu? Or do you serve up looks?" Lydia wheeled forward, the chair's wheels clicking against the tile edge. She approached the counter with the calm of one accustomed to chaos. Her voice was steady, unwavering. Today's special is black pepper steak. Move it along, soldier, Vulture snarled, sneering at her lack of reaction. Fang chimed in, narrowing his eyes in mockery. Your battlefield must be a filing cabinet and a typewriter, writing reports and thinking you were really in the fight, huh? No one else laughed, but no one rose to challenge them either. Lydia remained silent. She continued laying each menu on the counter, aligning them like strategic maps. Even at rest, she moved like a trained soldier. But Vulture didn't relent. Funny how the Corps keeps people like you around. Only slows everyone else down, he drawled, his voice thick with cigarette smoke, laden with scorn. Then, without warning, Claw shot up, strode behind Lydia. She barely glanced right when his hand snapped onto the wheelchair's handle. In an instant, the chair lurched forward. The front wheel slammed into the counterleg with a dry crack. The jerk threw Lydia off balance. Her shoulder slammed into the chair's side. She teetered. The cup of sweetened coffee tipped, splashing across the tile. A stray fork flew off, striking a table leg and spinning wildly. The metallic clatter echoed harshly in the silent diner. Lydia fell. She tumbled from her wheelchair. Her left knee slammed into the floor. Her hip struck hard, sending a jagged pain up her spine. The air was forced from her lungs in a sharp, "Huh!" Her left hand shot out to brace herself, sliding on the spilled coffee, while her right gripped the edge of the napkin as if it were her last anchor. The wheelchair tipped to one side, then toppled over, its rear wheel still spinning helplessly in midair. The diner froze. The clatter of knives and forks hitting the floor was the final sound. Ruby stood stunned behind the counter, her rag suspended in mid-wipe. A young server, no older than 17, stood rigid in the aisle. His eyes fixed on Lydia as if watching a movie crash he didn't know how to rewind. The couple by the window bowed their heads, gripping their coffee cups tight. No one moved. No one spoke. Vulture shattered the silence with a roar of laughter, his head thrown back as if Lydia had slipped on a banana peel rather than been shoved by him and his cronies. Fang joined in, a broken, jagged laugh that sounded almost monstrous. Claw snorted with satisfaction, his face flushed with glee. Lydia lay on the floor, both hands struggling to lift her body, coffee-soaked jeans clinging to her leg, her hand trembling, yet her eyes wide open. No tears, no pleas, no cries, only heavy, ragged breaths and a gaze drilling into the empty space before her, as if she weighed whether to strike back with bare hands or wait for the right moment to retreat. No one stepped forward to help. No one intervened. And the worst part wasn't the fall. Not the dull ache in her hip from the impact, not the dark stains spreading across her jeans, but the silence. A silence too perfect, too crowded, yet utterly hollow. Lydia remained on the floor, her eyes unwavering. She did not cry for help, did not apologize, did not cry. She only clenched the napkin's edge, holding on to something right in a world so skewed. Meanwhile, the laughter echoed on, haunting, as though they had claimed the entire room, and no one dared to take it back. Lydia lay still on the cold tile, sweetened coffee seeping through her jeans, dark stains spreading in rivulets. A dull ache ran from her hip up her spine, yet she neither moaned nor complained. Beside her, her worn leather wallet lay overturned, revealing a faded photograph. Her and her unit before that fateful blast. In the image, Lydia stood at the center, desert sunlight glinting off steel helmets, her expression stern, but her eyes shining. On the back, scrawled in bold marker, now clear in the light, "She is the guiding flame." No one in the diner saw those words, But for Lydia, a single glance was enough to steady her spirit. She did not cry, not from pride, but because tears were never her chosen means of survival. Her left hand pressed into the floor, her right hand curled around the napkin's edge as if it were her final support. Then, with disciplined resolve, she pushed herself up in one decisive motion, slow, painful, yet unwavering. She twisted toward her wheelchair, now overturned, gripped its push rail. With a firm tug, the chair righted itself. She climbed back in as she had done countless times, needing no help, no audience, and certainly no pity. Across the room, Vulture, Fang, and Claw lounged as if they'd just witnessed mere entertainment. They laughed, not as loudly as before, but with a satisfied smugness, as if they'd won an invisible victory. Fang twirled a small knife between his fingers. Claw leaned back fully, boots propped on the table, revealing soles caked in red dirt. Vulture beckoned another server with a condescending drawl. "Get us a drink. Been waiting long enough." Yet not everyone remained motionless. At a window table, a boy of about 10, Caleb, sat in stunned silence. His wide eyes never leaving Lydia since her fall. He said nothing. He did not blink. He simply turned to the man beside him, his father. William Tate, a former U.S. Marine Staff Sergeant, stood without helmet. On his faded jacket shoulder was the patch of the unit he'd served in. His sun-baked face and firm jaw spoke volumes. Without a word to his son, he rose calmly, leaving a half-eaten sandwich behind. He strode out the door, unhurried, yet each step hitting the gravel floor like a patrol through hostile territory. Once outside, he drew his phone, pressed it to his ear. "Tate here," he said tersely. "Send the team to the Silver Spur Diner. One of ours has been insulted." He hung up as soon as the reply came. "Understood." No further words. Inside, Lydia was back in her corner, her sleeves still damp with coffee, the hem of her shirt dust-smudged, yet her hands moved steadily, folding the napkin as before, roll, fold, place. Each motion precise, a lifeline amid the tense hush and ugly laughter. No one dared approach, but no one dared meet her eyes either. She needed no escort, only the freedom to continue. Vulture glanced around, bored by the lack of reaction. He stretched, cracked his neck. Fang now reclined in his chair, whistling a hollow tune. Claw still rested his boot on the table, occasionally glancing at Lydia to confirm she remained. Silent, present. Then, a sound from outside, tires grinding on the gravel. The entire diner froze. A dark green military SUV rolled in slowly, gravel dust billowing behind like a tiny cloud. Emblazoned on its flank was the unmistakable emblem of the U.S. Marines, eagle, globe, and anchor, painted in reflective paint. No one could mistake that symbol. The vehicle stopped dead in front of the door, engine cut, yet the air did not settle. It tightened. Vulture blinked. Fang ceased his whistling. Claw dropped his boot from the table, set it on the floor. Small motions, but clear. Someone had sounded the alarm. The door opened. 3 stepped inside. First came a man with salt and pepper hair, a robust frame, limping on a polished wooden cane. On his chest gleamed a staff sergeant's chevrons, faded stripes, yet crisp. His gaze swept the room, silent, as if scanning a battlefield. Behind him followed a young Marine, brown-skinned, hair cut short, pushing an empty wheelchair. He did not look around, his eyes fixed solely on Lydia at the back of the diner. Lastly, A female captain entered, her uniform immaculate, her name tag shining, her chest laden with rows of medals glinting under the fluorescent lights. They spoke no words. They needed none. They moved into the space like a unit arriving at the precise coordinates at the precise moment. Instantly, every sound vanished. No one stirred. No one dared whisper. Not even Vulture dared to laugh. The diner's atmosphere shifted, thickened, compressed, as if awaiting roll call before a final muster. Everyone waited for something. Not out of fear, but because of their presence. The way they stood, the way they gazed. No one could fake that. They didn't need to give orders. They were the order. And Lydia, still seated in her corner, now lifted her gaze, her eyes meeting her comrades'. Her hands continued folding the napkin, but her heart, though beating slow and strong, knew this. She was no longer alone. The salt and pepper-haired staff sergeant halted before Lydia's table, his polished combat boots standing squarely on the coffee-stained tile. He did not scan the room, did not nod to anyone else. His gaze rested solely on the woman sitting upright in the corner, her sleeve still damp, the freshly folded napkin on her lap. His cane stood rigid like a flagpole, and then, with a crisp, unwavering motion, he rendered the formal salute. "Staff Sergeant Carson," he intoned, his deep, steady voice resonating throughout the diner. "I apologize for our late arrival." Even seated, Lydia reacted with military precision, her back straightening, chin lifting, and she returned the salute. Her eyes brightened, not with surprise, but with something long absent, recognition, the presence of a comrade bound by blood, by discipline, by oath. Behind him, Captain Emily Ross stepped forward, her boots clicking with resolute authority. Her uniform pressed to perfection, her ribbons gleaming, each medal a story unto itself. Her gaze swept the diner like a blade, pausing unflinchingly on the three men seated barely 3 paces away, Vulture, Fang, Claw. "We have received word," she declared, her tone measured, authoritative as an order, "that one of our Marines was publicly harassed right here." No one answered. No one dared. Lydia shook her head gently, her voice soft yet clear. "It's of no consequence, ma'am." Staff Sergeant Joseph Lane interjected at once. "With respect, Sergeant," he said, his eyes never leaving Lydia's, "no one, and I repeat, no one, lays a hand on our own, not in combat, not on home soil, not ever." Behind them, the young Marine who had been pushing the empty wheelchair stepped forward. He stopped beside Lydia, his gaze fixed on Claw, yet his words were for her. "Sergeant Carson saved my life in Helmand. You pulled me from a burning armored vehicle when no one else dared return." Lydia tilted her head, inclined slightly toward him, her eyes widening. "Private Brooks?" she asked. He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Corporal now, thanks to you." His voice was steady, yet carried a weight that made the listener's throat tighten. From the far end of the diner, where sunlight filtered through a dusted window, a boy, Caleb, stood slowly. He said nothing. No words were needed. Beside him, his father, William Tate, stood tall, returned the old salute, hand to forehead. No words were spoken. Yet that gesture rang out like a bugle call to muster. An older man seated by the window, wearing a baseball cap embroidered with Vietnam veteran, also rose to his feet. He said nothing. He simply straightened up, raised his hand in salute, his gaze fixed on Lydia. Two plainclothes soldiers at a middle table, members of the National Guard, with their unit patches still on their shoulders, stood as well. Then two more. Then a woman with salt and pepper hair, her posture still as rigid as it had been on roll call. Within seconds, nearly half the diner was on its feet. No one gave a signal. No one shouted a command. They just stood, erect, solemn, forming an invisible barrier of strength and respect. Vulture shrank in his seat, as though for the first time in his life he understood what it felt like to be small. Fang, the loudest of the three, glanced down at the floor. The coffee stains on his boots stark under the gaze of his own guilt. Claw, the man who had shoved Lydia to the ground, could not utter a word. His hands pressed to his knees, knuckles white with tension. None of them still smiled. None dared move. They no longer owned this room. Lydia said nothing more. She did not need to. The silence was no longer a prison. It was proof. She remained seated, her sleeve still damp, her spine as straight as a blade. And for the first time since they had arrived, the room belonged to the person truly worthy of it. A soldier, a guiding flame. A week after the incident, the battered metal sign hanging above the Silver Spur diner was removed. In its place appeared a navy blue wooden board, hand-painted with a new name, Beacon Cafe, the guiding light. No grand announcement, no ribbon-cutting ceremony, yet every passerby paused at the threshold, perhaps sensing that something important had transpired here, something that made it impossible to carry on as if nothing had happened. The wall behind the counter was no longer bare. In its stead hung a gallery of framed photographs, local veterans once stationed in Vietnam, others deployed to Iraq, even those who served in support roles yet wore their ranks with pride. Beneath each image, name, unit, years of service, no ornate borders, no LED spotlights, just real faces in simple wooden frames, standing sentinel as a reminder that sacrifice need not be extolled, but must never be forgotten. The table near the counter, where Vulture once propped his boot and sneered, remained empty. No reserved sign, no velvet rope, yet no one sat there. All seemed to understand intuitively. That seat now belongs to no one. It is the diner's silent scar, a wound felt rather than touched. Lydia continued to arrive each noon, punctual as the wall clock, now corrected to run on time. She claimed her usual corner beneath the bright striped curtain, her hands folding her napkin with the unwavering precision of a soldier who never abandoned discipline. On her chest gleamed the Semper Fi badge, symbol of loyalty and honor, shining in the sunlight streaming through the window. A small American flag, stitched to the back of her wheelchair, fluttered gently each time someone passed. Patrons no longer averted their gaze. They looked, nodded, offered quiet salutations, sometimes pausing to say, "Thank you for your service." Young and old alike, even mothers guiding small children to the photo wall, whispering, "These are the ones who keep our peace." On the wooden placard by the door, chalked in white script, "For those who have served." Mike, the manager, after the incident, hired two more veterans. Both wore simple shirts, each with a small American flag pin on the sleeve, a silent identification. No explanations needed. Their posture, the crisp "yes, sir" and "yes, ma'am" spoke volumes. Sarah, the young server who once trembled as she cleaned in silence, became Lydia's unspoken apprentice. She learned to read the chevrons on the badges, to address her as Sergeant rather than Ma'am. More importantly, she learned not to ask the questions that need not be asked. "When did you lose your leg?" Or, "Are you afraid?" And instead discovered that respectful silence can say everything. Every Tuesday at noon, The dark green military SUV returned to the door of Beacon Cafe. 3 Marines entered. Staff Sergeant Joseph Lane, the salt and pepper veteran with his polished wooden cane. Captain Emily Ross, her gaze piercing as though reading every thought. And Corporal Nathan Brooks, the young Marine Lydia once pulled from a burning armored vehicle in Helmand. No menus were exchanged. Ruby, still at the register, simply nodded and signaled the kitchen. They sat together with Lydia, 4 uniforms of different colors, yet united by a single spirit. The coffee was poured full. No one spoke much. But every now and then, Brooks would share an old story of the time Lydia defied orders to return into the rubble for a comrade, or when she wheeled herself across a military airfield just to thank the medic who saved her. When Lydia smiled, it was no longer just on her lips. It touched her eyes, softening them, making them shine, with a light not born of the sun, but of knowing she was no longer invisible. From a moment that seemed cruel, from the shove to the tile floor and the stony silence of an entire diner, the little cafe had been reborn, not merely through its new name, its fresh sign, or the photographs on its walls, but by the awakening of a small town. They no longer turned away. They bore witness, and they chose to come forward. Now, every noon at Beacon Cafe plays out like a gentle symphony. The soft clink of cutlery against plates, the pour of coffee into cups, the murmurs of patrons, and sometimes Lydia's light laughter, ringing clear, striking the listener's heart, for it is the laughter of someone finally remembered. One autumn evening, as the Beacon Cafe's lights cast a warm golden glow across the dark wood tables, and the veterans' photographs on the walls reflected a soft haze, the glass door swung open. The wind chime tinkled once, and a young figure stepped inside. She paused in the doorway, clutching her crisp new uniform cap. Her kit pressed and neat, her creased trousers exact, but her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. Her gaze swept the cafe, as if afraid she'd walked into the wrong place. Lydia Carson, who was clearing the window-side table, looked up. Her wheelchair wheels clicked as she rolled forward, stopping before the trainee. "First deployment?" Lydia asked, her voice gentle but carrying clearly across the room. The young woman nodded quickly, her back straightening by instinct. "Tomorrow, ma'am." Lydia offered a slight nod, gesturing to an empty chair by the main table. "Have a seat. The coffee's good, and it's better shared." The recruit hesitated, fingers fidgeting with her cap, as if fearful of breaching some unwritten code. Lydia smiled, a rare but genuinely warm expression. "You're not intruding, Marine," she said. "You're carrying on a tradition." Those words loosened the knot in the girl's throat. She stepped forward, sat in the offered chair, and placed her cap on the table with both hands, as if laying down something sacred. Staff Sergeant Joseph Lane, seated nearby, quietly lifted his cup of black coffee. No slogans were shouted, no formal greetings offered. Yet all around the cafe, veterans, from the silver-haired with Vietnam patches to the fresh faces newly discharged, echoed the gesture. They raised their cups. They nodded, a silent welcome, full of weight. And the young woman sat there, eyes glistening, not from fear, but because she knew she had found the right place. After that night, Lydia was no longer just the napkin folder, the silent observer in the corner. She was invited to speak at the local high school, not to lecture on war, but to speak of comrades. She shared stories without gunfire, the ragged breaths of pulling teammates from rubble, the calls in the dark, the quiet laughter over hasty meals in the trenches. Students fell silent, Teachers asked for extra time. A week later, the town unveiled a small plaque before the courthouse, in honor of those who served. Meanwhile, names like Vulture, Fang, and Claw vanished. No one mentioned them openly, but whispers said they'd lost their jobs after the incident video spread online. Some said they left the state. Others claimed they changed their names. Lydia didn't ask. She didn't care. No time to look back. She was busy guiding new recruits, like the young woman who stepped in that evening, teaching them how to fold the flag, how to hold their chin high in uniform, how to march forward without offering apologies. She spoke with Mr. Jin, a Korean war veteran who once hid his medals out of shame, now pins them to his chest every Sunday morning. She coached Sarah, the young server, in the proper way to address ranks, in listening not just with ears, but with respect. One Wednesday afternoon, Lydia received a handwritten letter, its envelope stamped with a unit seal. It was from Nathan Brooks, now promoted to staff sergeant. His tone was as straightforward as ever. You were the guiding flame for me. Because of you, I'm still here. To serve. To protect others as you once protected me. I have not forgotten. Lydia folded that letter neatly, placed it beside the faded photograph in her wallet. The one from long ago inscribed, "She is the guiding flame." Today, Beacon Cafe is no longer just the little diner that served lunch to town residents. It is where people pause to remember, to nod at the veteran quietly seated in the corner, to raise a glass to the young service member about to depart, to recognize that hope, kindness, and honor still endure, so long as someone keeps watch. And at the heart of it all stands Lydia Carson, the woman who was once shoved to the floor, once silenced like a cold draped cloth, now the torchbearer. No need for drums, no need for honor rolls, just a steadfast seat, a smile reaching her eyes, and another generation being led by her flame. Lydia Carson sought no glory, yet her story illuminates a truth, that bravery lives in steadfast hearts. In America, where freedom is paid for by sacrifice, every veteran is an undying flame. Do you know someone like Lydia? Someone who quietly shoulders burdens so others can stand tall? Share their story in the comments. Let us honor those silent heroes. Hit share to spread Lydia's journey. Show the world how a single act of kindness can transform a community. Subscribe to Veteran Best Stories to discover more tales that touch the heart, where courage and compassion are never forgotten. Comment respect to stand with Lydia and all who have served. Together, we keep history alive through your voice.